Good evening and welcome to the General Election Candidate Forum for Sarasota County Commission District 3. I'm Vilya Johnson, Vice President of the League of Sarasota County League of Women Voters and tonight's moderator. I'd like to thank Forum Chair Liz Barber and her team for their hard work in making these forums possible. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. The views expressed are those of the candidates, not the League, and this forum is not an endorsement of any candidate. The League does not support or oppose political candidates or parties. Tonight's forum is for candidates whose name will appear on the November 5 general election ballot for Sarasota County Commission District 3. Please note that only registered voters residing within District 3 can vote in this election. To discuss the format for tonight's forum, candidates will have 1.5 minutes to reply to questions and to make concluding remarks. All questions will be asked of all candidates. The order in which the candidates answer questions will be rotated with each question. Candidates are requested to answer the question that is asked. No time will be given for rebuttal. Candidates may discuss their opponent's policy positions, but may not make personal remarks regarding other candidates. Our timer will ring a bell when 20 seconds remain in the time to answer, and ring twice when time is up. League guidelines prohibit any recording of this forum. The League will record the event, which will also be streamed from our website at lwvsrq.org and from our YouTube. Our guidelines prohibit anyone from using any portion of this recording for any purpose. All candidates here tonight have agreed to these rules. I'd like to introduce our candidates by seat. First, Mr. Tom Knight, Republican, and secondly, Sherry Thornton, no party affiliation. Candidates, thank you for participating in our forum. Yep. The first question is, please introduce yourself, describe your education and experience related to this position, and explain why you're the best candidate for the position. We'll start with Mr. Knight.
Well, thank you. I'm Tom Knight. I was in law enforcement for 34 years, including 2 years with the City of Sarasota Police, 20 years with the Florida Highway Patrol, 12 years as the elected Sarasota County Sheriff. I have a bachelor's degree from Florida State University and a master's certificate in public administration from the University of South Florida. In August, I won a brutal primary election with nearly 61% of the vote. Developers in Sarasota, Manatee County funded my opponent with nearly $1 million, which they used to attack me relentlessly for more than 1 year. I won with 3 reasons. Many people still knew my track record as your sheriff. I refused to run a dirty campaign and stayed focused on the issues that matter to our community and to our voters. And I called out developers for controlling elections and using practices that were destroying our quality of life in Sarasota County. I'm a 51-year resident of Sarasota County. I'm running because we have seriously gotten off track. Our budget has ballooned to over $2 billion and our taxes will continue to rise. Development is rampant and our elected officials are controlled by the developers. We've forgotten about our obligations to the people and neighborhoods that have been here for a long time. And I can't tell you how many times I heard that in the 9,000 doors that I knocked on during my primary election bid. This is my home. I believe it's my responsibility to take care of it.
Thank you. And Ms. Thornton.
Thank you for having us tonight. We really appreciate the League's having this forum and the opportunity to be in front of the people. I do want to call out, there are many people in the county that are suffering from the recent storms. And it just shows what great vigilance we have in the community, that we're supporting one another and getting through this. But I want to recognize there are people in the county that are struggling. With that, my experience and my education, I was born in Ohio. and I have a bachelor's degree from Miami University. I have a master's in business administration, and I worked for over 30 years as a healthcare executive, serving the community and understanding community needs, and then developing strategies to make services that fit those needs. And I think in Sarasota County, we have gotten off track. The developers are running the county. We have decisions that are being made at the commission level that are detrimental to the people that live here and their well-being. And I'm running to be a voice for the people that live here in Sarasota County. Thank you.
Yeah. Our second question, we will begin with Ms. Thornton. And the question is, Sarasota County Commissioners are elected to represent single-member districts. In your view, what are the special needs and priorities of District 3?
You know, it's interesting. As I've been talking to the people that live in District 3, they're very concerned about the overdevelopment. They're very concerned about the flooding that we've been seeing. And they're very concerned about the costs of insurance that we're seeing. And when I first started running for county commission, I really felt like the insurance issue was more of a statewide issue. And what I've seen by, going to county commission meetings and challenging these zoning variances, the commissioners are actually giving variances to builders that are detrimental to the overall community. When they allow builders to build in flood zones, when they decrease minimum drainage easements after we see flooding in Debbie, and you have more experience of flooding in the county because of this overdevelopment, it's going to impact those costs. So I think that the root of a lot of what's happening is we're focusing on giving developers what they need or what they want, but it's at the expense of what the citizens need. We've got to take care of the infrastructure, the roads. We've got to take care of our drainage and our sewage so that we're not dumping hundreds of gallons or millions of gallons of sewage in our waterways. And that's what the residents want. They want to see that we're focused on them and their needs and what their priorities are.
Thank you. Mr. Knight?
Well, very similar to the fact that, when I was out walking the streets, hitting 9,000 doors, it validated why I ran and why I came out of retirement to do this in the community I grew up in. People are very frustrated. It's become very expensive to live here. The taxes have gone up. And most importantly is that they truly know and understand that the developers are controlling the policy decisions of our Board of County Commissioners. Make no bones about that. That's why I ran, to break that cycle. And I broke it in the primary, and I want to be an advocate for the citizens, and not just District 3, but the entire county. Most importantly, we need to start focusing on existing neighborhoods. South Venice, Venice East, Venice Gardens, Northport, they feel left behind. These are people who have lived here for a long time, and we have a lot of work to do with their drainage. Many neighborhoods haven't seen drainage ditches cleared for years like we used to see in the past in Sarasota County, and that's why they're flooding routinely. Roadways in South Venice and Venice Gardens are flooding now. They've never flooded in the past. They also want us to stop violating the 2050 plan and making constant exceptions for increased density, zoning changes, special exceptions, and violating our comprehensive plan. And most importantly, they're not dumb. They want to see us stop subsidizing developers by agreeing to build the roads they continue to build, and use our surtax dollars and our tax dollars to repave roads and work on our infrastructure in the existing neighborhoods.
Okay. Well, Mr. Knight, you jumped ahead a little bit, because our next question, which you will take first, is, do you support maintaining the 2050 comprehensive plan and its current growth management policies? Why or why not?
Well, I wouldn't be running for office right now if they weren't constantly violating the 2050 plan. Let's be honest. That's why we're here. And this is a community that I grew up in. I moved here before the interstate was built. And our previous Board of County Commissioners, the Shannon Stobbs, the John Thaxtons, the Nora Pattersons, God bless her, she passed away. They did a wonderful job in 2002 by putting a comprehensive plan together. And if you read about that plan, it was nationally acclaimed as a way to grow a beautiful community. And then what happens is you get developers, you get county commissioners term limited, and the rest is history. You get politics involved, big money involved, and you get the votes. And so would I support it? Absolutely. I think we might even need to go back and bring the community back together to say, not just that we support the 2050 plan, but where are we at? What's been violated? But what do we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again in the future? And make sure we put it in a charter so that the charter review board has some say in these things too, because more voices in government are bigger for us. So absolutely, I've seen the community I grew up in that I used to swim across the intercoastal waterway when I grew up in South Venice. I've seen those waters dirty because of the growth. And I believe that the 2050 plan has been violated and we need to either comply with it or restructure it and hold it accountable.
Thank you. Ms. Thornton?
Thank you. I wholeheartedly support the 2050 plan. As you know, as Tom referenced, it was lauded as one of the premier growth strategies across the nation. And it's pretty much just been destroyed by the commissioners. What is in there now, whether it is the wildlife corridors, the 500-foot buffers for communities that are east of 75 to help with the development there, to make sure that we don't have the flooding and those types of things. Those are just totally eroded. The county commissioners are waiving those. 3H Ranch was a prime example. They decreased green space, they decreased buffers, they decreased drainage easements from minimums. So we have to not only take a look at what the 2050 plan is today, but how do we get back to what it was so that we're protecting the community and the people? You know, I hear a lot about property rights in the state of Florida, and I believe in property rights. However, what are we doing to the people and the communities that are now flooding because a community's built next to them that's higher than them? We all know water runs downhill. We're jeopardizing residents' well-being, both personal and financial, by not following through on this plan. And I would wholeheartedly support putting this in the charter so that we do have accountability, so that you can't buy off decisions that hurt the residents. Thank you.
I'm so glad you both brought up the Charter Review Board, because we're actually having a forum just like this tomorrow night for the Charter Review Board candidates. So we want our viewers to be aware of that. All right, next we will begin with Ms. Thornton. And what are your specific plans to address and fund the county's infrastructure needs and the problems of traffic congestion?
You know, that's a really good question. And I think this is going to require a long-term strategy. We didn't get to where we are overnight, and there has been so much development approved that we don't even have the easements to expand the roads that we need to expand. So I think the first thing is we need to make sure that the impact fees are really there and going towards projects that are going to benefit the citizens and not the developers. As I did a budget review of the county, it's interesting, with all the development we've had, the amount of dollars that have been collected in impact fees have remained level or decreased over the last 3 years. How is that? So we've really got to get in and make sure that we're using the money that's appropriated where it's appropriated, and that the developers are paying their fair share of these costs. And the other piece to that is we've really got to focus on getting the county staff saying, here are the needs of the county. And it's not just roads, it's also sewer and drainage. We've got to fix these issues to protect the citizens of the county.
Thank you. Mr. Knight?
Yeah. Well, those all need fixed, and it's not cheap to do it. And we can talk about it, but you got to have a plan to do it. First and foremost is, if we go back to fiscal neutrality on development, I think that the development itself would slow. And then when you go to fiscal neutrality, that means you're not using surtax dollars and county taxpayer dollars to build the roadways for the developers to build around. So naturally, if they're building their own roadways like they were required to do under 2050, and if you read the charter talks about fiscal neutrality. So we have fiscal neutrality and the taxpayers you're not using taxpayer dollars to build the roads, and you have the money to repave roads and take care of infrastructure. The other thing I want to look at really hard is how many buildings are being built now. So when the last referendum went through, it made it easier for the county commissioners to do bonding. And I think one of the things that needs to be looked at is how many buildings are being built now, because a bond is basically using a credit card in a way to pay back. And to me, I'm a constitutional conservative where I believe that government exists for everybody, not for the government. And that typically means if we're going to use money to bond anything at all, we don't need to be bonding governmental buildings. We need to be bonding roadways and infrastructure where everybody gets use out of it. So that's something I want to put on a priority and have a discussion about with board members.
Thank you. All right, the next we will begin with Mr. Knight. How do you plan to balance Sarasota's development growth with environmental concerns?
Well, yeah, that's very simple. You stop giving them all the exceptions. You know, the environmentals already, they're beyond they're out east of I-75 now. I mean, that was supposed to be an area that they couldn't reach in a way. The 2050 plan, like we talked about earlier, had everything exactly what was talked about, so that we had our clean water, our vegetations, and everything was there. So it's very simple. It'll take care of itself if we comply with the comprehensive plan, do fiscal neutrality. And, one thing that I say too is I was here when Midnight Pass was open. And I know that's a federal issue in the EPA, but I think we've seen Sarasota Bay being cleaned out already. So, growing up here, that was blue water. And now we have all the septic tanks, everything flowing into it. The second thing too is when we talk about bonding is all of our infrastructure with the water quality systems that the county has is at a tipping point. So we need to have a plan to have more of those systems put in. Those again were the systems that were supposed to be put in under the plan by the developers when they built those type of infrastructure or those type of developments. It's going to take a lot to fix what's broken.
And Ms. Thornton?
Yes. So as you look at balancing growth, again, we have to adhere to the codes that we have. We've got to have the green space. We've got to have the infrastructure planning to go along with that. I think we've lost our way in the county, and a perfect example of that is our wastewater treatment plants. The county was actually sued to upgrade their treatment plants to be advanced wastewater treatment. And they're only doing it because they lost the lawsuit. We need somebody that's going to lead in the county and say, what are best practices? What are leading practices for community? Because our waterways are a gift, and it's what a lot of people come here for. So we need to be looking in the future and saying, how do we get back to making sure that we're taking care of the waterways, that we're taking care of our conservation preservation areas versus voting that to become major government use. That was something I went and spoke at a county commission meeting. We've got to get back to the basics of the county and ensure that we're doing things the right way and that we're taking care of our water and our lands and our people.
Okay. I think we've covered a lot of the ground of this next question, but I'll give you the opportunity to add any comments that you would like to, and we'll start with Ms. Thornton. What specifically do you think the county commission should do to mitigate future damage from storms, flooding, and sea level rise?
Well, the first thing is we've got to know what all we need to do. One of the things that I called for after Debbie was an independent water study by a hydrologist to say, what are the issues we have that cause this? So the first thing we've got to do is get to where we know what that is. We also know that we dump millions of gallons of sewage in our waterways because we haven't hardened our sewage systems. So that's one specific thing that we can do where we're going to have to raise some of those areas or barricade those off so that we don't dump raw sewage into our environment. And that's just one example of what we know. But the big thing we've got to do is really model and find out what's occurring during these storms and what do we need to fix and harden. And first you've got to know where you are to be able to know what to plan for. But the sewers, that is one thing that I know for a fact that we could take care of that we already know is an existing problem.
Thank you. Mr. Knight?
I think we need to have the courage to do things like that, kind of like the Board of County Commissioners did with Philippi Creek back in the day. For those of you here remember what they did with septic systems there, and also have a plan for the water treatment systems, and like we've talked about. But I think it's more important that we return the government to the people and that we bring experts in to talk about it publicly so we can make the right policy decisions. And I can tell you, since in 1999, there was a lot of policy changes where county commissioners don't want people coming in. They don't want their staff talking publicly about some of the things that are necessary and needed in this community. So we're never going to be able to stop storm surge, right? Now, I grew up in South Venice. The house I grew up in across from the Coastal Wallway never had water in it till Helene and Milton. So those are houses that are there, been built in the 50s that got water in for the first time. So I think storm surge is hard to prevent again. But sometimes we have to protect our community from themselves and ourselves. And that is how we develop and what we do, and bringing the Steve Skulls of the water people in to talk openly about what's going to be necessary for the future so the public can hear it, so that when we start making these plans, they're going to be ones that have to fund it, and we start making our budget decisions that can happen. So we're going to have to open ourselves up to the public and let the experts come in and talk to us to make those policy decisions.
Okay, thank you. As county commissioner, what will you do to address the need for affordable housing, and how would you fund your recommendations? Mr. Knight?
Yeah, well, first, let's start prioritizing over large residential developments. Let's make it a priority and not developer priorities. That hasn't been the case last 10 to 15 years. The current county commission has allocated some federal money to affordable housing, the American Rescue Plan money after COVID, and more recently the Resilient SRQ because of Hurricane Ian. But if we wouldn't have had a Category 5 hurricane and Ian, we probably wouldn't have any money done. So really, there's no strategic plan for it. Bad votes have got us into this pickle because the more they voted for large developments, the greater our need for affordable housing has become. One of the suggestions I would say is, one, the task force that was put together is that when you appoint people to a task force and you're asking them to volunteer their time, or organizations, the Gulf Coast Community Foundations and that group that was put together to come up, and experts come up and make a recommendation, is that we don't poo-poo those recommendations. We have a dialogue about it, and we don't tell them we don't want to hear it. We're asking them to help us with their expertise. And secondly, what Drayton Saunders and part of that was that use a percentage of the property tax from new development to fund local affordable housing trust fund. So we have a starting point on affordable housing.
Okay. Ms. Thornton?
Yes, I had the privilege of sitting in on the final meeting of the Sarasota Consortium Affordable Housing Committee. John Thaxton chairs that. And, it was fascinating to see the folks from Family Promise, Gulf Coast Community Foundation, Sarasota City Commissioners were there. And, they are pulling together a 12-point plan of what the county can do to implement to help tackle affordable housing. And, one of the things that was part of the 2050 plan that isn't there, that's a recommendation, is to bring back language that when you're granting additional units above and beyond the vested units of what the developer bought, a percentage of that needs to be workforce housing. It needs to be something that the police, that the firefighters, that the teachers can afford to live in. And, that's one way to tackle that issue. And I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and something that we can bring back and reinforce the 2050 plan values. The other point to that is, again, when somebody buys properties, they've got property rights to build so many units. Those are vested units. Above and beyond that, you can take a percentage of the property tax that then becomes funding for a funding source for additional affordable housing needs. And we've got to become creative to figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and we will start with Ms. Thornton again. How will you address the problem of homelessness in Sarasota County given the new no public camping law effective this year?
Sure. We've got a lot of great organizations. There's a program called Shifts where the sheriff has been partnering with local community organizations to help people solve their issues. Homelessness is not a silver bullet. You're not going to have one solution fits all. But you've got to look at almost one of the concepts that I've been reading about in homelessness is a navigation center. So that when you have somebody that they find themselves homeless now, what is it they needed? What brought them there, and what do they need to get, for themselves to get back into a housing situation? And that's going to take wraparound services. So, that's one of the models that's been seen nationwide as having success. So in order to address the homelessness, I think we've really got to go back to the experts, to the people that are working the problem today, to say, what's your top issue and how do we solve that? And partner with them to do that.
Okay, Mr. Dunning.
I can't answer that in 90 seconds because I know so much about it. So it's good to hear about Sheriff's Housing Initiative for Transient Services. That was my program I put into place when I was sheriff. The navigations programs I was put into place when I was sheriff, paid for by the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, because these individuals, many of them ended up in the jail that I ran, and they really just inhumane conditions they were living in were just inappropriate for me as sheriff. That's not the way we want people to live. So the chronic homeless and the family homelessness, family problems, of course, help them out a lot. So I think that we've come a long ways. And if you remember, I wanted to run a shelter back when I was sheriff, and not a shelter to store people, but a shelter that's humane, where we could have people come in. Talking to David Berender from Sarasota Memorial to have doctors come in there, and friends of mine are dentists come in there and help people. But most importantly is the relationships with the nonprofits, with the Salvation Armies that we worked with a lot when I was sheriff to get these people into services, mental health, substance abuse. And I think one of the things that's been left behind that people don't talk about anymore because this county commission don't really care, that I'm going to care about, is what's going on with our mental health taxing district that we worked so hard to get done. So there's a lot to do. I can't answer that in 90 seconds, but certainly there's opportunities there, especially with some of the things we did 4 or 5 years ago to build on.
Thank you. Next question. The county commission recently overrode the established process used to award taxpayers' dollars to nonprofit, social service, and arts organizations. Do you agree or disagree with this action, and why? Mr. Knight?
Well, let's be honest. The 211 that was so controversial was simply a political ploy by my former opponent and a current candidate to distract from things, to talk about abortion and emotional things. So certainly 211 is important. After Debbie, we saw an increase of 100 calls going to the 211 system for people who needed service. And so honestly, I don't know what it would be after Milton, but do I believe that every nonprofit should be given the money just from the county every year? No, I think that two things I would do is, one, make a recommendation that the county funds for 3 years to a nonprofit so that they're staggered, so the county can build their budget and these nonprofits can build their budget without cutting services, like the court program was cut from Light Share that we put in to keep mental health and substance abuse people out of jail. That program was cut, to see what services are being used by the county government. And we have to remember, these nonprofits are an ally of the county government because they pick up the bulk of the amount of money being spent on the services. So I think they all need to be a net to be reviewed continuously by the Board of County Commissioners for effectiveness. But did I agree the way they did it? Absolutely not. It's unprofessional.
And Ms. Thornton?
So I would not support what they've done. Having a healthcare background, we had social service agencies, we had tertiary care hospitals, we had the whole 9 yards, physician companies. And when we see and hear the things that we're just talking about, affordable housing, homelessness, we cut programs that helped working families, the Early Learning Coalition, Harvest House funding that was cut. All of those things impacted the working families in our community and people that are on the bubble. So, we have an advisory committee that are the experts, boots on the ground, that see the needs of the community. We have a ranking system of what's needed in the county, going back to it being driven by the needs of the citizens versus a political agenda. And, we've got to work with those experts to say, hey, this has been an issue in the county now. We may need to look at moving some of those funds there. So we've got to support the working families in our community, and we've got to do it with the experts.
Okay. Next question to Ms. Thornton. I don't know why I keep struggling with your name, and I so apologize for that. It's not that hard. In your view, should county commissioners take an official position on social issues such as abortion and LGBTQ rights?
So I recognize that the county commission had taken a position as a commission, and I feel like that is just not appropriate. We have so many things we need to tackle in the county that will actually make the quality of life in the county better for the residents that live here. Taking time and doing partisan politics makes no sense to me. I like the model of government where the cities are nonpartisan. We really should be focusing on the roads, the infrastructure, the quality of life. And my personal opinion or belief shouldn't have any impact on the services that are being delivered to the county. It should be what's needed in the county. So I do not agree that that should be a county priority. I don't believe it's something the county should be weighing in on. We've got too much work to do to get back to where we need to be. Just look at our roads, look at what we're seeing happening in the community. So let's focus on real issues for the people and not partisan politics.
Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Yeah, it's in my 12 years sheriff and after I retired and saw it, I've never seen so many resolutions being done on things that are not, I guess you could call the job description of the Board of County Commissioners. And if I wanted to weigh in on abortion or some of these national issues that, you could run for Congress or state Senate, or the things are more applicable for the type of elected position that those apply to. But we don't have congressional leaders come down and fill potholes for us and talk about home rule. I would say that if we're going to weigh in on anything, that we need to get our legislative delegation, our congressional leaders to let us have home rule, and we not worry about resolutions that are controversial, because we represent everybody, no matter what our party affiliation is or who we are as a person. And I was very fortunate as your 12-year sheriff is that I was able to wade through those things, that I didn't let my personal thoughts on issues become involved in my decisions as sheriff. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I've told a couple commissioners I know is that I will never sign a resolution that has no application or no bearing on the betterment of Sarasota County or anything that would happen or have anything to do with Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you. Next question for Mr. Knight. What specific steps will you take to attract high-quality, long-term jobs beyond tourism?
The EDC. I think that the EDC is important to us. I think that's something that has been looked at, as maybe not favorable to a couple county commissioners politically, but I think the EDC is very important to diversify. If you recall, at one point in time years ago, they wanted to bring high level, high profile people to come in from a large roofing company, a national roofing company. So I think we got to show more here, because what I'm worried about is we're going to become Fort Lauderdale. We always have rooftops. And so what do we have to offer here? I think that we need to rely on the EDC a little bit more, and Aaron Duggan at Visit Sarasota and them that know our community, that we need to rely on the EDC to see if we can bring some different type of diversity businesses in here. We did lose years ago, if you recall, the PGT wanted to build another plant here, and it wasn't really given a lot of credence by commissioners. So I think that we're going to need some exceptions for workforce housing and those that want to do it. But I think relying on EDC is going to be important to attract those people here. Executives want to live in Sarasota County. We can get them here.
And Ms. Thornton.
Yeah, so it was interesting. Last week I was having coffee with one of the directors at the EDC, and that was one of the first questions I asked him. What is it that new businesses are looking for to come to Sarasota County? And the first thing they said was infrastructure. We've got to get our infrastructure in place to accommodate that. We've actually had some businesses on Fruitville Road that wanted to expand and couldn't because the sewer system is at capacity. So again, we've got to get back to building our infrastructure that will accommodate new businesses coming in and make sure they know that they're going to be taken care of when they're here. I think the workforce and having a workforce that can live in the community is very important to them. And it goes along with being able to have workforce housing. So that's a big part. And I know, the chambers of commerce are actually looking at that to see how the businesses can help impact and work with workforce housing. And I think the other thing is, how do we support our businesses? We had one of our top 10 manufacturing plants that went 7 days without power after Milton. So we've got to make sure that they're a priority in those situations, and how do we help get those issues resolved for existing businesses?
And we will continue with you, Ms. Thornton, with how do you plan to engage younger voters and ensure their voices are heard in a county where the population skews older?
That really is a great question. I've been going to schools. I've been trying to get involved in projects with schools, giving some volunteer opportunities. And I really think that a key to this is younger people want to be heard. But not only do they want to be heard, they want their voice to have credence. And too many times, when youth are asked for their opinion or asked what we can do, it's their feedback is not really recognized or given the credence that it should be. In order to move the county forward, I think we've got to do things more internally in the county that are more technologically driven. And that's a great place to bring in youth and to bring in their voices. God knows, they say if you can't fix your phone, find a 14-year-old. So I think by driving more into technology and leaning into those types of solutions, we can pull people into the county, but we've got to make sure that we're incorporating their views and voices.
Okay. And Mr. Knight?
It's kind of a follow-up to your previous question, though, is I would call economic diversity. Is that, right now our younger people, their opportunities are limited purely because of the type of businesses that we have here. And, and Erin Silk is young and she knows the younger people. Aaron Duggan's young. So we need to have some economic diversity in here to attract younger people, technology diversity to bring them in. But I think your question is how do you engage them and get them involved in politics, if I was correct about that, is that, we need to do some bring them in with the Board of County Commissioners and have some days with them. At Venice, there was a professor there, he's retired, a teacher there now that's retired, that had his own club and bring guest speakers in to talk to the kids to get them engaged. But I think it's hard with to let them know the impact they can have to stay engaged. And I think over the last 10 years, with how difficult it's been to be in politics, and the dirtiness of politics is that it's hard to attract young people in until we level us off and have some level playing field, and people are nice to each other again.
Maybe they can lead us in that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Knight, what steps will you take to improve access to mental health services for our community?
Wow, mental health taxing district. Let's be honest. If you recall, when I retired, I was over First Step for a while. I was in a light share, and I was there briefly to merge the final merger of First Step, the mental health district, and the substance abuse district. So I think that that's something that's been lost. I think there was a lot of priorities on that back with the previous Board of County Commissioners, and certainly the uniform that I was wearing at the time was a big say in it and in the community. And so I think that we need to, I don't know, I haven't had access, nor can I get access right now with our public request, is what's going on with our mental health taxing district. I had a reporter call me, because, I forgot about that. Well, it's drifted away, and it needs to become a priority again in our community, and the voices of our community need to want to make it a priority so that we can do it. Now, Bayside just changed its name, of course, to Cornell, Sarasota Memorial Hospital. They're doing really good work, but I think it's limited, is that we need extended care, not just crisis care. Some of the programs that we were doing when I was sheriff have been abolished now, going out into the community with navigators and social workers. So that's things that I enjoy and things that I'll push on to enhance those mental health issues and substance abuse.
And Ms. Thornton?
Mental health is a complicated issue, not only locally, but nationally. And, again, as Tom talked about, working with our healthcare providers, we've got to look at, what is safe for the people that are in need of services and what can be provided. One of the things that I worked on in healthcare was a mental health issue, and a lot of it revolved around having the right medications and the right types of medications. We found in one program that if you switch to a once a month type medication plan, that people were less likely to come back in contact with acute care for mental health services. But you had to get that, and you had to get that to the person. So again, it's looking at the needs of the community. What are those specific issues? And then how do you engage with your experts to make sure that you've got the processes, the medications, and the wraparound services to support people in need?
Thank you. Well, you're both very efficient, and we have answered the questions that we developed for this program. But I would like to give each of you the opportunity to make any closing remarks that you would like to, and we'll start with Ms. Thornton.
Thank you. And again, thank you to the League for having us, and for the people that have signed in to watch. My commitment and pledge to you is I'm here to stop overdevelopment, not stop development. We need to grow as a community, but we need to grow the right way so that it benefits all of us that live here. I'm a firm believer in actions speak loudest. I've been going to county commission meetings. I've actually partnered with Siesta Key. We won a decision against the Unified Development Code change for non-conforming lots. So that was something I was proud to be a part of and do at the county commission meeting. I've, lost some. 3H Ranch was definitely a loss of something that I tried to work against. But I'm out there fighting every day for you now. And I'm also the only candidate that's not taking developer money. So my actions are aligned with my message. And I want to be here to make sure that everybody in the county is recognized and respected, and that the government is reflective of you and your priorities, and that we're taking care of the people that live here. And that's my pledge to you.
Thank you. Mr. Knight?
I come out of retirement. I was your sheriff for 12 years, and I come out of retirement because the developers are controlling our board of county commissioners, and I didn't like it. And so I knocked on 9,000 doors and took on the challenge. And I won that first round. Campaigning is like an interview with voters for a job. I believe I'm best qualified for this job because I have a lifetime of training and experience in government and leadership. When I was your sheriff, I had 1,000 employees and a budget of more than $120 million. Few people have been as deeply involved in Sarasota County as I have. I've helped with crime, drug addiction, homelessness, mental health problems. I was a key member of the emergency operations team during disasters, and I've been involved in many of our social services, nonprofits as a partner, advisor, mentor, board member, and fundraiser for those nonprofits. Unlike other candidates, you don't have to make guesses about my past or how I'm going to conduct myself on this board. You don't need to refer to my LinkedIn page. All you have to do is Google me or ask other people in the community about my commitment to a community. Finally, I'm not afraid to try things differently. And when I get a lot of pushback, I can take the heat. I've bucked the status quo and the outside influencers, and I'm certainly not afraid to make a decision against a developer. I proved that in my primary victory win.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates and also to the members of the Sarasota League who worked so hard to make all of our forums possible. Voters, we really encourage you. Now is the time to vote by mail. Early voting has started, so you can vote in specific locations or on election day at the polls. Your voice or your vote is your voice, and it matters. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Y'all have a great evening. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.